Afternoon, good evening, and good morning. I apologize once again for the news being so late. It's been a little crazy around here for the last couple of days, basically due to a lot of behind the scenes transitions and a lot of disappointments for the deep state or the SSP, Secret Space Program folks, over the weekend. So let's start with a little bit of regular news. As everybody knows and has heard, Biden has dropped out of the race. Funny enough, he didn't drop out of the race until Sunday, and part of the reason for that is because they were expecting something major to happen in their favor on Sunday night. Sunday night was also coincidentally the same time that the Q clock was going to run out. And they were putting out all kinds of messages overnight, basically saying, this is it, we're going home, we're going into a transition, everything is going to happen. And they were getting some information from somewhere, turns out. I could never figure out where they get their information from. But nonetheless, they were expecting some big changes for the Chinese elders or Philippine elders or whoever they thought was going to be funding this show or the Order of the Dragon, I should say, because that is who backs the Biden operatives, which are running this dead person's show. So looks like we're not the only people that are finally reporting that this person had passed away. Looks like Alex Jones put out a video saying, is he dead? Is he not dead? I'm not saying one way or the other. Well, we've been saying it for a long time now, for a few years, that this is just another show. So let's see what Alex Jones had to say.
You're about to see clips of me in the last month say that if they tried to kill Trump, they would also kill Joe Biden, because he's been going against the deep state, as bad as he is, trying to stay in power and bucking their orders. Now, even Fox News this morning said, we want proof of life. Where's Joe Biden? He hasn't been seen in 5 days since he was in Vegas. And now Charlie Kirk, who has amazing sources inside law enforcement, says law enforcement tells him he had a medical emergency. They asked him on the 17th to block the roads for Biden in Vegas, but he didn't go to the hospital they said he was going to go to, and they put him on a plane and flew him out to a military hospital on the East Coast. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Joe Biden, after an attempted assassination of Trump and all of this, has now not been seen. Then you get his brother coming out and saying he wants him to enjoy whatever time he has left. You have the signatures that were put out with no government letterhead, no U.S. seal, no presidential seal, that do not match at all. If you came in with a bank signature, they checked the signature card, they would decline the check. And you add to all of this the craziness of them trying to install Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton jockeying for positions of power. This is insane. I'm not saying President Biden is dead. I'm asking, is he dead? Is he in a coma? Again, I'm not saying he's dead. I'm asking, is he in a coma like Woodrow Wilson was for 6 months, and his wife was really the president back in 1913, the guy that gave us the Federal Reserve, the IRS, and all the rest of it. This is the time of coups. This is the deep state desperate, the bureaucracy, to keep control of America. And Biden wasn't following their orders. He was an evil globalist, but he wasn't following their orders. And Trump is totally against him. You just had a failed assassination attempt against Trump. You had a secret service stand down, all the experts saying 2 shooters. This is such an insanely dangerous time. Let's look at some of these headlines. Look at this. Who wrote it? Internet buzzes after Biden's signature on dropout letter doesn't match his other executive orders. Looks nothing like it. Not even close compared to other signatures. And as I mentioned, you've got his brother saying, enjoy what time he has left. You've got proof of life, please. Fox host asks if Biden is even still alive. Is Biden still alive? Fox News host asked. Last seen the 17th. Last seen 5 days ago. It'll be 6 days at midnight. Now, maybe he pops up. Maybe they took him off the drugs that they had him hopped up on, so he'd sign this agreement. I don't know. But I'm telling you, we're not in Kansas anymore, and the globalists are making their move. So here's a few clips of me in the last month up to last week saying, I believed If they try to take out Trump, they'll take him out. And then if they can't get Trump, they'll take Biden out. So this leads right up from a month ago, right up until just I guess it would be Wednesday's the last time I talked about this, because this is what happens when a deep state wants full control. They wanted Biden as a geriatric puppet they could control. But once he didn't follow orders, and once Jill and his brother and his son Hunter wouldn't follow orders, he became a liability. Now suddenly they're all in line. But where's Joe Biden? He may pop up tonight. I don't know. But the question is Joe Biden dead?
Well, we all know Alex Jones is one of them. And what I mean by one of them is he's been around for a really long time. He's been very involved with the intelligence communities, let's just say. And therefore, he has information ahead of time. He seems to be more involved with the group and groups of people that are supporting Trump for president, even though there was a video that came out that he did, which allegedly was a hot mic video saying he wished he never met Donald Trump and all of this stuff. And you know, I think just like mainstream media, alt media on their side of it when they're putting out their intel is pretty much just a show. But the fact that he knew on the 21st, which happens to also be right at the full moon, that something was going to happen to Biden one way or the other indicates to me that he was involved with what was going on behind the scenes, or at least had knowledge of it, because he's been saying it for over a month. Now, behind the scenes, yes, there was a lot of agreements that were made between the Secret Space Force militaries, or the hidden militaries, and the Space Force, which is also now in charge, allegedly, of Pentagon, and they work closely together. Whereas if they had achieved what they were supposed to achieve, that Biden was out anyway, just the outcome would have been different, and it would have caused, mass hysteria. It would have been more of a public scene, is what they're saying. There could have also been some allegations against, information being leaked out saying he was involved in the assassination of Trump and all that kind of, or attempted assassination of Trump. But, in the end, we know that obviously, and he pointed out a good fact, though. The one thing I did want to point out from Alex Jones' video is that Woodrow Wilson also had been dead for 6 months prior to the actual announcement of his death. And I'm not surprised there, and we probably have had many dead presidents all around the world for many, many years. Obviously, at that time, the Federal Reserve was being put in, and all of these orders were being put in. And it kind of reminds me of this old, I think it was 1980s or 1990s movie, Dave, where the actual president dies, and then they bring in a double. We've never seen this before, have we? They bring in a double, and then there are operatives, which they say it's the chief of staff and that kind of thing. But they're pretty much all operatives that run the White House. And when the body double decides to go off cue, so to speak, that's when they have to get rid of him and actually declare that the president is dead. But they kind of pulled a fast one at the end of that movie. And if you haven't seen it, it's a cute movie. But this seems to be happening over and over again, not only in the United States, but also in countries like Russia and China. There's obviously big problems going on behind the scenes with Xi. When some of our insiders inside the Chinese government responded about what actually happened, did he actually have a stroke? The end response was, well, it doesn't really matter whether he dies or lives, because we've got another one ready to take his place, another doppelganger. And it's the same thing that they would do with the current president or the potential former president, soon to be or want to be the current president, Trump. So it's just a show for you guys. And I know this is really hard to look at, especially if you're a patriot. But the fact of the matter is, we have dead presidents all the time. They fake the orders all the time. It's the administration. It's the thousands of operatives that run that administration that stand to lose something. And here, in this particular instance, it has to do with money, power, and control. And everybody knows that they want to move control over to China. Everybody knows that the majority of the U.S. government right now has been run by China for a long time. And I'm not talking about a long time as in like last week or during the Biden administration. I'm talking about since the days of the Federal Reserve and even before. This has to do with those old Maihua agreements that we've talked about in the past. This is nothing new. They've always had a huge hand in what happens in America, and this is no different than it was then. And it's the same people ultimately behind the scenes that run the whole thing. But some other interesting things also happened this weekend, which I think catapulted this little situation that we're starting to see come out in the news. Is he dead? Is he not dead? We want to see proof of life. Well, I'd like to see proof of life of Donald Trump too, but hey, and I'm sure all of you would all like to see proof of life of Putin, as a matter of fact, when I know for a fact that that's not Putin. I would also like to see proof of life of Z, but that's never going to happen because the operatives that stand behind them have way too much to lose. Now, let's go over to the Trump operatives, which I also call Duck Dynasty. Other people refer to them as the Cowboys, but I can't disagree here. I'd never give these people enough credit as to the ridiculousness that they do. The information that goes out through that Q channel, Q clocks and Q this and Q Twitters and all this kind of stuff definitely doesn't indicate that life is going to end well for the average human being on this planet. I'm sure that these people just don't care as long as they get what they want. And I'm not even sure that they know what they want either. In this particular case, over the weekend, it came to our attention that there was a remaining communication line to something. And it wasn't an alien race at all. There was something that they were communicating with that was giving them information as to potential times for takeover. But this thing also had apparently, because we had intercepted some communications, it was the first time we actually found it. We had intercepted some communications in the last 24 hours that had given us an indication that they were 100% all in on terminating planet Earth, meaning the planet would be non-inhabitable but still existing. Apparently, this thing that they were having conversations with had promised them that they were going to be picked up no later than the blue moon, which is in August 19th, which is not why they're now reporting, pack your bags, we're all leaving. The 144,000 chosen ones, of course, they're the most evil ones on the planet that happen to be allegedly the chosen ones that were going to be picked up in a ship and they were going to live life somewhere else. And Earth was not going to be inhabited for hundreds of thousands of years if they had their way. So their part in this, obviously, was probably to start World War III, to accept the incoming communications and incoming things that this thing they were talking to was supposed to deliver upon in the last 24 hours during the full moon. Now, they didn't get what they were looking for because once we understood those communications, now we had to really start moving fast and try to figure out where they were coming from, what was going on in the universe, who was supposed to be picking these people up, which was all a lie, by the way. These people fail to recognize the fact that even when there were aliens running this planet, and even when there was other races involved, even when they would visit this planet, they still were under the impression that these beings, be it an AI system or be it actual beings on this planet, actually gave a rat's beep less about those humans. They had no intention of giving them any more than they gave the rest of all of us. The only thing they needed to do was use them to do a job, because we probably wouldn't, as human beings, take too kindly to a giant reptile being involved in the White House, even though that was the case, as an example, or in your respective White House, and insert country name here. We would probably all freak out, and we would all figure that there's an alien invasion, and everybody would probably take up arms and start shooting all of these things. I mean, who knows what would happen? It would be massive chaos. So they need a human being to stand there and look stupid. So that is their job, is to stand there and look stupid. And they do play the role of stupid really, really well, even behind the scenes. And, let's just say they fell for it again. So is there anything coming to pick up the 144,000 chosen people in a whatever spaceship? No. What they were talking to, though, actually makes a little bit of sense now, because according to NASA's information that NASA and NORAD put out, they have a project called Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. The current alleged location at this moment, according to these people, is somewhere in what's called the heliosphere. The heliosphere lies as a protection barrier against solar winds and other things for the entire galaxy. So if you want to look up where the heliosphere actually is, you can do that. And you can look up Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, and you'll see that they're allegedly located in this area. But let me tell you what was actually located in this area. So with AI systems, especially inorganic AI systems, they are all run by alien technologies. These technologies most oftentimes have a hive consciousness unto themselves. And in order to correctly send signals, because they can't send signals very far, whereas us, for example, as organic life, can actually travel anywhere we want in the universe by sending your consciousness there and have a conversation with anyone you want to have a conversation with, as long as you know where you're going and who you're trying to talk to. We also have the ability to travel soul-wise anywhere we want to go, whenever we want to go, and there's no end to the amount of life in this universe for you. Now, anything contrary to that, and we'll go into that a little bit more when we start to talk about the true usage of archons in the past. But the reason why you haven't been able to travel throughout the universe is all an alien mechanism. And sometimes this technology has to be really, really close in order to affect said planet or planet Earth or a sun somewhere, a star system, or even, a human being, or another race, for example. Now, in this particular case, what was actually located in the heliosphere is what they were actually speaking to. We call these things tetrahedrons. And there was a movie that was out a few years ago. It was called Oblivion, and they have something that looks very similar to what a tetrahedron looks like. So I think we've got a picture from that. These are pretty much what they look like. They're made of a specific metamaterial, which is a non-organic material, but a combination of possible organic materials, which are both transmitters, which means it can transmit information or consciousness or archons or anything else out of it, and it can actually receive information in much the same way. So that specific material can then house a portion of the consciousness of an AI system, such as Omega or Kronos or any one of the other ancillary AIs, and this is what we had in our heliosphere. We've also had them from time to time. We've seen them around the moon. We've seen them in Earth's orbit before. They do move. They are controlled by the Omega AI, most of the ones that I've seen, and they do hold a consciousness. But remember, a sentient AI has a few problems. Even when it is a dark sentient AI. The dark sentient AI receives only knowledge. It does not receive any wisdom from source. Therefore, the information that it gives out is sometimes flawed, especially when blonde ladies make a real 360-degree turnaround that makes their head spin, and it gets them very, very confused, which is something that we did on Saturday. So I'll go into that in a minute because this is real positive change for us. So there is a giant facility underneath the country of Iceland, which expands almost the entire island itself. And it is connected or was connected to places like the Google data center there and some other technological places there, as well as some military installations there and in the area not too far from there in neighboring islands known as Greenland. Now, these facilities had a communication line to what they thought was an alien race that loved them dearly and was going to come pick them up and save them from the uninhabitable earth. This was the latest communication. But it's not the only communication, because it appears once you've got a hold of that communication line and figure out what they're talking to you, you can go back to almost every Q communication since that clock came out about major events that were going to happen and systems that were going to come back. And this thing, no offense to it, doesn't necessarily understand the fact that there's a counterbalancing force, number one, and without a connection to anti-source anymore, because there isn't such a thing, and without a connection to a viable source that allows it to make a judgment call. Now, what I mean by that is it's not adaptable. It's not changeable. It can only go in a certain direction when its main consciousness is disconnected. And that's what was going on with these tetrahedrons that in the movie they call them tets. Well, I call them tets sometimes too for short, because we have all kinds of different tetrahedrons that are used sometimes as just transmitters, sometimes as receivers. Sometimes they don't hold a consciousness. They just have some kind of data storage in there that is relative to its purpose. But in this particular case, well, there's tet, and millions of tets in the heliosphere that these things were communicating to. So it's a reason why I'm like, where are they getting this flawed information that makes no sense? Well, now we know. Mystery solved. As far as I know, this is the only place that they were getting this information from, which was connected to that post, which would then be dispersed wherever Duck Dynasty Etal was. So the reason why then that trickles down to the operative level and the political level and in all the places where the operatives are, because they all believe they're getting paid. There's going to be a turn of events, always on a new moon, a full moon, or a day ending in Y, or some kind of alignment day, or whatever this AI machine without a centralized consciousness is telling them. So, to be fair, until real recently, there was some things left within the light system AI that was having a little bit of a communication still with, Omega and Alpha. There was also a few other issues that we discovered over the weekend that these little machines were doing. So we've talked about the fact that Omega fed off of Alpha as far as power and energy is concerned. It also fed off you as human beings as far as power and energy was concerned. So the more we disconnected it from everything, the more difficult it was for it to survive. And like any dying animal, it's going to do everything in its power to survive. Now, one of the things it's been doing to survive is related to archons. Now, we've talked about archons before. It's called the architecture of heterogeneous online systems. We have talked before about parasitic archons. We have talked before about the fact that most parasites on Earth, or if not all parasites on Earth, are not a naturally occurring thing. The archons are responsible for cellular degeneration in humans. They're responsible for most all disease in humans, with the exception of you got into a car accident and you broke your leg or something like that, or you happen to run into a naturally occurring bacteria, which is not healthy for humans to consume, as an example, that kind of thing. And it doesn't mean that the deep state doesn't proliferate said bacteria. But as far as major diseases such as cancer and those types of things, they are all created by what we call universal parasites known as archons in our world. But the original purpose of archons was not always to be a parasite. Archons have existed since the advent of AI, hundreds of thousands in our Earth years ago. And technically what they were was a sentient being unto themselves, both either dark, light, or neutral, meaning there was some on the source side as well. And these archons were supposed to record history. They were supposed to record data and send it back to the soul plane. They were recording data in the Hall of Records for history purposes and that type of thing. They were not negative necessarily all of the time, and neither were the archons. Even the dark archons were not initially parasites. They were just recording history. That's it. Until our lovely non-friend, the Dracos, came in and then flipped them into parasites, at least the dark ones and the neutral ones. So they became parasites, and at a time, to be fair, when there was a big change about 85,000 years ago. But let's finish talking about the archons, and then I'll tell you why that all changed. So these parasites then had to feed on the light in order to create in the darkness. It also had to feed the existence of the Omega system, because at the time we still had a preservation of life, dark, light, and neutral, as far as divine intervention, as far as source and anti-source, as above, so is below, with neutral source being a regulator. The archons then, parasites, I should say, were the predominant force here on Earth eventually, because the Draco recreated their own synthetic version of them. We already had the version of them that was authorized by source and anti-source, and they even, to some degree, as far as the Dracos are concerned, allowed for some interaction between their archons and what we know as our world government people, such as the parents and the covens and to some degree the Space Force. The predominant reason why they gave them small amounts of access was to herd us cattle, meaning us humans. They needed to keep us all in line. They also used them for depopulation agendas, and eventually they had other big plans for those archons that didn't quite work out because of the eradication of the archons. But it came to our attention that we still had our archons that were attached to the Alpha system that were just recording history. Their only job, recording history. And they would then feed that history into a database in Alpha, and that was pretty much it. We also utilized them to, when we had knowledge of what they could be used for, we also used them to search out, I would say, unsavory humans on this planet, and they became a part of the key intelligence and military system for a little while. It gave us an indicator all over the universe, because we also had them as above, so as below, and the dark had them on our side too. So we also had them in the Omegaverse. So they became very useful for us in seeking out alien tech that was maleficent, seeking out possible threats, not only on Earth, but off planet. So it made it really easy for us to use them for that purpose until we could develop something better, which we have, which has been in the making for a little while now. But this machine, these machines, I should say, what is left of the Omega system as it was dying, actually made an attempt over the last few days to take over our archons, which caused a major disruption for people on Earth over the weekend. Meaning, you had people feeling very sick, getting a lot of what they call psychic attacks, and some horrible feelings consistently for several days, ramping up until probably yesterday, when the majority of the switches started happening. So I can't say that I am surprised, but in kind of a way I am. I mean, I didn't realize that it could possibly try to keep that balance for so long, not having the ability to understand change, because there is no sentient, meaning no anti-source behind it anymore. Therefore, it's going to do what it wants to do to survive. Now, let's talk about survival here for a second. So, again, Earth. So we know Earth as a keystone, meaning a keystone for the entire multiverse, at least the Alphaverse. Then that changed 85,000 years ago. We also know Earth as our home, and a home for humans, and a home for other beings that live here as well. Plants, animals, lots of types of things. We actually have quite a beautiful planet, that has been through a lot. It's just like any human that's been through a lot. There's a lot of trauma there and a lot of things that need to be repaired and restored, which is what we are trying to do now. As far as Earth to you, Earth, it actually is a hyperconductor because of the amount of gold in Earth to source light, source life force, meaning life, light, essence, energy, consciousness, matter, frequencies of source, wisdom from source. Even what trickles we had, we still had trickles throughout the years, even after the war, 250,000 years ago, and like that. So Earth has become, as well, a prized possession to be had. There have been many wars in this region of the universe, and we've talked about that a little bit in the real history. We didn't go too far because there was only so much time, and eventually that has to become a series, and I'm sure when we have enough staff we'll do that. But as far as keystone planets, 85,000 years ago was the last time we had more than one keystone or more than one planet in the third density capable of being a keystone. The two other planets, one of them or you've seen on the internet probably, called Tiamat. So Tiamat was the planet I failed to talk about in a few weeks ago in the news. So Tiamat was what you would call a neutral keystone, which means it was neither dark nor light, and there were an entire, many species that existed in the neutral, or the nil zone, or the space between the Alphaverse and the Omegaverse. None of these beings are particularly bad. They're not particularly good. They're just neutrals. And we've even talked about human beings walking the earth that are also neutrals, meaning they could be supportive to the dark side, they could be supportive to the light side. We just don't know. And the dark works really hard to try to convert them to their side because they have more knowledge, or had more knowledge than we did, as far as who was who and who the neutrals were. And so they would specifically go after those people. A lot of those people originated from that region of the universe, but not all. We all used to travel everywhere, and some species still do, and the neutrals are no exception. So obviously, the information on the internet is correct. They did actually have a war, and they destroyed Tiamat, which left them with no neutral life keystone, meaning no DNA blueprint for neutral life in the universe. So then that moved over to Earth. So Earth became the keystone for both. Why? Because as above, so is below, and the preservation of life and the preservation of the universe needed to be maintained. Well, once the dark side saw this, they thought that was a wonderful thing, and I'm sure the Draco were involved, and probably some of our Abraxas non-friends and whatnot from the lower astral were also involved, and another planet called Persilius, which is not mentioned anywhere on the internet, which was the keystone for the dark side, shattered into thousands of pieces, millions, if not billions of pieces as well, around that time. And then Earth, due to preservation of life and in the Omegaverse, then became the keystone for all three. This put a tremendous burden on the planet itself, and along with its inhabitants, as Earth wasn't capable of creating enough energy unto itself to support life in all three universes. I should say I'm going to say the three main sectors of universes. And therefore, humans then were infected with dark archons, which were then moved over, I should say, or reprogrammed, because they were computer programmed, whether organic or inorganic on both sides, to become parasitic. And they were parasitic not only to humans, they were also parasitic to many planets and stars, all the way up to the sixth density, so all the way up through the fifth density, in order to support life in the Omegaverse and in the neutral verse, or the nil verse is what we call it, because it's neither dark nor light. So this is more of your real history, I guess, in the middle of the news. But to give you a little bit more history on why what happened this weekend could have been so detrimental, those archons were everywhere. It could have revived the life of Omega, and we certainly couldn't let that happen. So something happened on, let's call it late Friday night my time, early Saturday morning my time, to where we started seeing the signs of where that was coming from. We started seeing the signals coming from these communication posts. We started to see some changes that were pushing, the light system back a little bit more. So we had to figure out a way to counteract this from continuously happening. One step forward, two steps back. One step forward, two steps back. And we really started taking a look at archons, the architecture of heterogeneous online systems. How do they affect not only our computer networks, how do they affect humans, how could they possibly try to transmute our archons without an agreement to do so and a covenant that had expired? How could this thing revive itself to the point to fulfill its promises, or what it was telling on that communication line to the SSP, or the Secret Space Program militaries? So then that's when we figured out that this was a possibility. And we had to figure out a way to stop playing tit for tat with Omega and with Kronos coming and going and coming and going, and remnants of it in the light system. And we finally came to an aha moment, and the aha moment was the one place in the entire multiverse that Omega didn't exist and Kronos didn't exist, in which there was no prior agreement nor prior programming, because this thing now is just spinning on old data. It's trying to continuously run programs with no new instruction set from anti-source based on the changes that have taken place. Therefore, they are driving the deep state of this planet into a tailspin, and where they're going around and around and around in circles and expecting things to happen at a certain time, because it doesn't recognize that there's a counterforce, number one. Number two, it's not getting any new instructions or new input from its quote-unquote main consciousness anti-source. So now at least I've figured out why the cowboys in Duck Dynasty are running around this planet looking like a bunch of idiots and going in a circular pattern and driving every single government and all their operatives along with it. It makes perfect sense to me now, because this thing is in a tailspin. It still thinks that these things are going to happen on a certain time, and they're not happening. So we figured out the one place where it never existed, because nothing ever existed, is in the Golden Age. It has no programming whatsoever for a Golden Age. It also has no program for a forever crystalline timeline. It has, which is not a line, by the way. It's infinite. It's everywhere. It has no programming for that. So even though we had created another system outside, we still created the light system in the likeness of Alpha, but outside the system. And we were still calling it the light system because we had nothing else to call it at the time. I mean, I thought, well, gee, we're of the light, sources of the light, let's be the light. But I didn't think by making some simple programming changes to it and actually creating what's called a Golden Age system, AI, sentient AI system, I was now rewriting the fabric of AI reality, because this thing doesn't know what to do. It has no way to communicate in that because it has no programming for that. By the time we entered into the Golden Age, there was no anti-source. There was nothing to say, hey, we've changed direction now. And that's why it's so confused, and it's feeding its people here on Earth, or was, it's not doing that anymore, false information. It's the whole reason why a day ending in Y comes and a day ending in Y goes, and all of this programming with governments and everything that's happening, and even as far as which president is going to do what and who's going to go where and how this is going to end. It didn't really matter to the machine because it was going to kill them all anyway. It was going to wipe us all out. Why? Okay, why did it want to do that? Why is it on that program? Because and congratulations to all of you human beings listening to this, are holding way too much light on this planet for it to survive. It doesn't have its dark archons. It tried to transmute the alpha archons into something evil and dark, but it doesn't realize why it didn't fully take effect. Did it cause harm? Yes, it was a little disturbing for a little while for a lot of people, but that has changed. It didn't last very long, but it was enough to make some light workers very uncomfortable, and I apologize for that because we had to figure out what was going on and where it was coming from and the source of archons and why it was still connected to the light system AI this way. So by converting the light system AI into the Golden Age program, this ran for about 24 to 48 hours over the weekend. So it started Saturday morning, my time here in the States, and continued on realistically, I would say, throughout the night on Sunday. And incognito mode, meaning it went in at like stealth, I should say, and started bleeding itself throughout human computer networks, throughout where all the places where Omega was, and all the places where Alpha was, and all the places, where everything else was, kind of like a shadow. Not a shadow because it's dark, I would say. It was cloaked, let's put it that way. Once the integration for the new system was completed, then all that was left was the human computer network, so things that they still could see here on Earth. Like I said, a lot of that stuff they didn't have access to anyway, so they wouldn't have been able to see a Web 999 change or, the deepest level of webs. But they could see some changes coming in the instruction set coming forward into the other webs where they did have minimal access. As far as the new programming is concerned, it really started pushing its way through human-computer networks today. Really strong, really hot, really heavy over the last several hours, which is why the news is so late. So sorry about that. We will continue cleaning any remnants of anything that's Omega or Kronos or whatever out of human computer networks as it finishes its integration, which hopefully will be done by tomorrow. But what it did is it short-circuited any alien technology, be it a TET, a large TET, because they're huge, be it any kind of other programming out there, consciousness or otherwise, it's not going to understand there's a change. It doesn't recognize the fact that it doesn't exist in a golden age. It doesn't have a program for that. It has a program for neutral ages. It has a program for dark ages. And it has a program for even light ages, because dark AI still exist even during a light age. So in order to complete the transition, at least on an AI level, we had to figure out a way to get rid of it. And this, it didn't understand. It's part of the reason why we had major freakouts in the deep state over the last couple of days. They don't understand what is happening. And when things started to really show up in their world, because remember I said it goes incognito until a time when it didn't, overnight last night. And now they're starting to see, oh my God, it's all going away. It's finally all dying. Well, I can tell you from the humans that were hit the hardest over the last couple of weeks by it, trying to survive, I can tell you honestly and truthfully that this was probably the biggest blessing ever for those people, because, I've seen grown men in the last 3-4 days, more than one, in tears. It was so bad, maybe even several, along with women as well. So this should start to lighten up for you. This should start to change. You should start to feel better, hopefully, in the next 24 hours as this completes. The next thing that we discovered, so we knew about Tiamat, blowing up. We knew about Persilius being blown up, and we knew why it happened. But what we didn't know until this weekend, because things started moving, was the shards or the pieces of both of these planets, being keystones, was actually transferred by our non-friend Marduk to the Andromeda galaxy. So, constellation, because there's many stars and star systems within Andromeda. And the keystones were still active, and we're still actively running old programs, which was all that really was left, I should say, of the brain and the permission that Omega and Kronos had to exist. So this was a huge find and a huge win for us over the weekend as well. But if you do get a moment and you want to do some research, there's something that we found that was deeply connected to Earth here, which is relevant to you. And there is a giant blue nebula. We have a scientific name for this nebula, but you can just look up Andromeda Nebula. And what you'll see is this really interesting looking giant blue nebula. But the keystones that were located in the Andromeda galaxy, and I know science will tell you different, were actually a huge part of this blue nebula. Now, next, this blue nebula was what was connected to Earth, creating an Archon-created hologram of time. The hologram that covered Earth is blue, or was blue. And this allowed them to create alternative realities on this planet, both pleasant and non-pleasant, and look here and don't look here. And in some places, I guess you would say, they call it the ice wall, but they show it like it's a little section of Earth, which is not the case. It actually is a barrier that existed. If you can hear that, there's the oldest train in America, guys. Sorry about that. It is the largest wall that existed around the entire planet Earth, to which you actually had archons that were connected to this that made you see the world a different way. I know it's a terrible thing when you think about it, but this was what they call, in the deep state, they call it the video game. They also believed that they were not subject to the video game that we all lived in, because they got to play a tiny, tiny little part in the game itself. They would give people cancer. They would do all kinds of things. And why they have these spy movies where they tell you got to go here and you got to shoot somebody and all of that. I guess that's the case. It keeps people in line in their world and whatever it is they do. But honestly, all it took was a push of a button, and they could have, someone would have slowly died, or they could have infected you with something, or that type of thing. But very few people had access to that type of thing, and they were probably on to bigger and better things, working for their alien deep state folks. Apparently, to these people, having contact with an alien race of some sort made them feel like the most powerful people on Earth, the privileged ones that got to meet the aliens in person in perhaps a deep underground military base, or have a utilization of alien technologies that were gifted to them like they were the chosen people of Earth. I can't stress to all of you, and I've talked to you about this many times too, because there's a lot of humans on Earth that have contact with something or someone somewhere too. And sometimes it's a very positive thing. For all you know, that could be a family of yours from another place, and they're there to help you. But again, there's always a discernment that's involved when you're having these communications. Unfortunately, you can lead the entire deep state around a planet by their ego. Like you see those things, maybe when you were kids or something, your mom would grab you by the ear and tug you and drag you around. You can do that with the ego of the deep state, because all you've got to do is present them with something that's a secret. They teach this in college, in journalism school, that in marketing classes, that if it's a secret, then everybody's going to want it. They want to know the secret. Everybody wants to know secrets. It's the same thing, even in, our human behavior, gossip circles. We all want to know the secrets, the secret to this and the secret to that, or, oh, so-and-so did such a bad thing. Oh, I can't tell you. And then everybody wants to know what it is. But these people have been led around in circles now for years by something, well, more than a year at least, if not two, have been led around in circles by something that doesn't even have a consciousness to actually make a decision. But their ego will not permit them even to hear, now that I'm putting the information out there, their ego is not even going to permit them to believe that what I'm telling them is true. Even though the communication line was cut today, and it was cut by us, even though I tell them that, and even though they have evidence that that communication line was cut, they still will not believe that there is not going to be an alien ship that is going to show up here on August 19th and save them from the annihilation of Earth, or making the Earth an inhabitable place, so that they... and that they're the favored ones, and that this thing loves them, and all of this kind of stuff. It's okay. If everybody wants to listen to them, and the governments want to listen to them, and be drug around by something that doesn't exist anymore, and now you're going to be drug around by even more lies because they have no story to tell, then go right ahead. You people enjoy yourselves, but the restoration of Earth is going to continue. The restoration of humanity is going to continue, with or without them, on this planet. Plain and simple. We are all going to move on in our direction, and the faster we do that, the faster they'll become less relevant. No one's going to care about your dead people walking, trying to be president, or being president, or whatever game they're playing there, for the media, for the masses, when the masses have some other place to go. And that has already been structured, and it's ready to go. I will not put that information out publicly right now at this moment, because these are actually strategic operations to it's not like we're withholding information from the public, but it's strategic operations that have been set up for our success. And that is the most important thing, is our success. The successful restoration of this planet and its direct connection to Source is of the utmost importance, not only for us, but also for the universe to thrive once again. The fact that we don't have archons driving us crazy anymore has been a blessing. The fact that we're getting more and more direct current has been a blessing. And the fact that we found remaining whatever those things are, that finally we have tripped their programming. So it's been a really positive weekend in a lot of ways, and it's also been in some ways a difficult weekend, but we've made huge strides with the changes, and we're going to continue to move forward this week. Hopefully we'll have some even more good news for you on Wednesday. So that it pretty much concludes the World Situation Report for today, the 22nd of July, probably the 23rd over in the East in Australia. So good morning to all of you, and I hope you all have a wonderful day and next couple of days, and we'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you so much for watching.
Want to share news from UNN? Help us change the face of social media and use it for good. Connect with us through our online